If you can find a seat and settle down a little bit. I'm going to take attendance in place of the town clerk. This is our regular town board meeting, and we'll be going on an agenda from the workshop last week, plus some new items. I'm just quickly taking attendance. It's obvious Councilman Valentine is here, Councilman Divany, Councilman Troy, and Councilman Butari all here. We'll let the clerk know as soon as she gets here. Just a couple of announcements. If you look at the top of the agenda, there's some hearing notices on there. There's a shredding day coming up on the 21st when you can get your old bills and checkbooks and everything shredded. And out front, there's flyers about the Orangetown bike study. The bike study is collecting information. Anybody can fill out the survey or go to the website and click on the interactive map and provide information to our consultants and the town board on areas of concern related to bike safety to inform this study going forward. So I'm just briefly mentioning a couple of items that are on the announcements. You can read them yourself for more detail. We're starting tonight. First, we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Where did Esther go? Hey, Esther. We need someone else. Michael Mandel, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Michael and Esther. We're starting out tonight with a presentation on behalf of Orangeburg, the shopping center there with the Stop and Shop Hotel, and their proposal, in short, is to swap out the approved little strip mall in the rear area for a daycare operation. They've left out the question of trying to get approval for fast food restaurants up front, which I believe the town board appreciates because there are certain aesthetic concerns and we weren't ready to cross that bridge. But they're here tonight, and this is Jerry Tortorella, their attorney. We know her well, and Jerry, I think on behalf of the board, just kind of want you to kind of cut to the chase. What is the proposal? What kind of a daycare? I know you've brought the representative of the daycare here tonight to speak to the board as well.
I did. Thank you very much, Mr. Supervisor. Geraldine Tortorella of Hockerman, Tortorella, and Weckstein of White Plains. And with me this evening is Matthew Jermel from Jermel and Kizel, the architect and a developer and a person very familiar with the daycare use in the particular daycare center. And what we'd like to do this evening, because when we were last with you, there were some questions about operations and questions about the propriety of the location of the site and other things. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Jermel immediately so that he can talk about those items, and then we can go further if you have any other questions. What I handed out were just some site plans in connection with the daycare center building. We've refined those since we were last here in June. We wanted to provide those to you. There's really very little difference between the approved building on the shops of Orangeburg Commons and the proposed building, except that we are proposing a smaller building for the daycare center use. But let Mr. Jermel talk a little bit about the use, and then we can talk about specifics of the site and process and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matthew Jermel. I'm a registered architect, and I am the architect for the learning experience. In this capacity, I've worked with them for about 14 years, and I've designed well over 200 of their child care centers throughout the country in about 15 different states. Sometimes I pretend to be a real estate developer myself, and I've actually developed 5 learning experiences that I have some ownership interest in. The child care center, the learning experience is a national chain of child care centers. They're headquartered in Boca Raton, Florida. The owners, it's a family-owned business owned by the Weissman family. The Weissman family actually started in the child care center in the mid-'80s under a brand called Tutor Time, where they built about 300 centers, and they sold that business in the late 90s, and when their non-competes expired, they started over with the learning experience. Currently, they have just over 200 centers nationally that are operating, with about 100 in development. And as you may or may not know, childcare is in great demand throughout the country as the population of the country grows. This proposed center is to be 10,000 square feet in the area. It was designed to hold 150 children, which would require approximately 24 staff. The center, if approved and built, gets licensed by the state of New York as a child care facility, sometimes synonymous with the word daycare or child development. It'll house children from about 6 weeks of age to about 5 or 6 weeks of age. And it operates from Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And some of the questions about operation and some of the is that it doesn't operate like a standard school. It doesn't have set hours where children have to arrive or be picked up. It's designed to cater to working families, and parents are allowed to drop their children off essentially at their convenience, but typically children get dropped off from about 6:30 to 9 or 9:30 a.m. in the morning. And there's actually half-day, three-quarter day, and full-day programs, but the last child leaves around 6:30 p.m. Never do you see all the children show up at one time. So you never see 150 children trying to get there at 8:30 like you might in an elementary school. The most you typically see is about 6 to 8 parents dropping off and picking up children at any given time. I know there was a question about safety in terms of the children potentially being in a parking lot, by a hotel, or by a train. Most of the children that attend this facility are of an age that they don't walk. A lot of them are carried in or handheld in by their parents. The parents are required to walk them into the facility. If any of us, not having children in the facility, wanted to get in, we'd have to be buzzed in through security. They look at us through a glass door and through cameras. There's a double vestibule. Parents are given a key fob that allows them to come in, and there's actually a touch screen on the reception desk where parents logs their child in, takes them to their classroom, and leaves. That process takes about 5 to 6 minutes on average. In the mornings, the parents are asked to not stop and talk to the teachers and ask questions about their children until later in the afternoon when it's a little less hectic. But once the child enters that environment, they stay in that environment. They don't leave the building unless they go to the playground. And as you can see from our proposed site plan, we've taken the approved building, which is approximately 18,000 square feet. We've pulled it back to 10,000 square feet and created a playground of about 5,000. That playground is attached to the building. When they exit from the building directly into the playground and then back into it. So the children are never running around the parking lot or even have the ability to do that. From a life safety standpoint, the building gets classified under the building code as an institutional use, not an educational use, which actually requires it to have some heightened life safety requirements such as sprinkler system throughout, fire alarm throughout, as well as any room that has more than 10 people has to have 2 means of egress, where all the other uses in the building code, like a room like this, which is an assembly, this room happens to have a lot of exits, but you don't trigger that second need for 2 means of egress until you get to 50 people with other uses. So it's a very safe and secure facility. There are cameras through the facility so that the director can watch what's happening in each classroom. There's cameras in the playground, outside, so that they can see what's going on as well. And those are also licensing requirements. That essentially kind of covers my description of the operation, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you might have of me.
How many spots are dedicated for this institution?
Parking, you talking about?
Parking
Parking
spaces?
spots.
Is it 40?
You know, it's far in excess of 40. The original building for the retail had a significant number of spaces that were on the Orangeburg Commons site, and if you remember, the cross-access easements, as well as the parking along here. We've retained this parking, we've added parking here, we've got some other parking spaces over here, and then we have the availability of this parking here. So we have far in excess of what's required by code.
No, the reason I ask, because you're going to have 24 staff, and you're going to have 150 people trying to drop off. I know not at the same time. How many, the previous use was a little bit different, you know, I think, than what you're proposing now. I'm just saying, are you going to have enough spots? Because I have young kids dropping off at schools or at, you know, it's you know,
We
it's
feel,
difficult.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, I don't know if you guys have allocated enough parking spots for this kind of use.
We actually think we're overparked significantly. Typically, these centers operate with anywhere from 35 to 40 parking spaces. What you find is 6 to 8 parents dropping off kids during that, at any given time, during that sort of 6:30 to 9 time frame. Takes about 5 minutes to drop your kid off, walk in, drop them off. So a parking space can turn over 10 to 12 times an hour. So that's a lot of kids coming in and out with just a few parking spaces. Then what happens is from 9:30 till the time parents come pick up, there's nobody parking other than the staff. So you have about 25 parking spaces. You have a food store next door, which sort of has its parking more off to the side, not really interfering with ours. And their busy time isn't from 6:30 to 9:30. It's usually after midday. And of course, weekends are heavy food time. So there's a synergy of the uses too, where the traffic flow doesn't really conflict with each other.
All right, I don't know if I buy that. I mean, young kids, you know, like going through the parking lot, I mean, as a parent who has young kids, I know I don't want my kids going through every day to get to, but that, you know,
Yeah.
convince me I'm wrong.
Yeah. You'll notice in the site plan, there's an array of parking spaces that are perpendicular to the front of the building and they face the building. And we have quite a few there, and typically we would designate those as drop-off pickup spaces. So the idea is that the parents park and they don't even have to cross a drive aisle with their children when they walk them in.
All right, and then the second issue or concern is you've got the outdoor space. It's a little close to the train tracks, you don't think? You know, you're gonna have the CRX trains coming in, it's pretty loud. You're not concerned about that?
I'm not. I mean, we've located childcare centers on busy highways. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any that are close to rail, but I'm sure there are some. We have a 6-foot fence around the playground. It's a solid fence. It's really 6 feet for safety and solid for safety as well, so people can't look in or look out. And that, excuse me, that helps defer some of the noise of the surroundings. But we don't really think that the frequency of the trains will have any effect on the playground or the use of the building.
Could you just say overall, the parking demand of this daycare is greater or less than the previously approved retail area?
I would say that the childcare need is less than a retail need.
And what about overall traffic, like the additional traffic coming out onto Route 303 or going around the back of the...
Again, it depends on the specific retail use, but what you'll find, as I stated, is that 6:30 to 9:30 is when the busy time is. In that time frame, 7:30 to 8:30 is a peak hour. But again, you see parents rotating in and out every 5 minutes. So again, a single parking space, 10 to 12 spots. Usually what we find is that childcare centers are not necessarily destinations. So what's happening is people are stopping and dropping their children off on their way to work. So they look for childcare centers that are already in their flow of traffic to work. So what we find, and traffic engineers will tell you, is that a significant amount of the trips that come to a childcare center are already in the flow of traffic. So people that are passing by on their way to work, they will look for, just like they look for the Dunkin' Donuts and the Starbucks that's on their way to work, maybe not a great analogy, but it kind of makes sense. They look for the convenience so that they can pull in, pull off. So we find that a lot of those users of this facility are already going to be flowing in that traffic field. We also find, and I apologize, I failed to mention, is that statistically, we find that about 25% of the children in the facility are siblings, so they're coming in the same car, and we find that 10% of them are out sick every day. So if you take the 150, if we were fortunate enough to fill this to 100% capacity, you're pulling off about 30% of those from trips because of the siblings and the illness.
Do you find that there's a good, I mean, I guess if I was a parent and I was bringing my kid in there, it would be a convenient time also to hit the supermarket and get a carton of milk or some eggs or whatever.
I would say in the afternoon you might see that.
Right,
You're not
on the
going to
way
see it
back.
in the morning because, you know, if they're buying food that's perishable, they're going to want to
So
buy
on the
it and
pickup,
and
they're
take it
likely
home.
to stop at the supermarket. or
Correct.
something like that.
Are you saying that it's going to rotate, not going to be a standard morning, afternoon, full day?
Correct.
People can drop off at 10
Yeah.
o'clock and pick up at 6, or?
That is correct. So the center is designed to cater to working parents, so they're flexible. Ideally, they want to see the children there before 9:30. There is some instruction, because they do have a curriculum, but parents have the choice of doing half-day, three-quarter day, full day programs.
And the age again?
As young as 6 weeks to about kindergarten age, 5 or 6.
Any other questions, guys, about daycare? Dennis?
When you speak about categorizing this as an institutional use, is that purely for building code purposes?
Yes, sir.
What are the other institutional uses that fall under the building
So
code
the-
that
the-
would qualify?
Yeah, the I-4 designation I gave it is kind of specifically for childcare where the children are less than 2.5 years of age. But basically, institutional uses are those uses where the occupants of the building either don't have the physical or mental capacity to get out of the building in the time of emergency on their own. So a nursing home, as an example, would be an institutional use. So the point being is you have children in the facility that are either infants or they're young toddlers that wouldn't know what to do in an emergency. So that institutional classification in the building code increases the life safety requirements of the building over other types of uses.
Does the facility provide busing of any kind? Is it a situation where people can get picked up at their house? if they're-
This particular organization does not have buses, okay? What they will do, if there's a local need, is they'll do before care or after care. And I've seen centers, and I don't know the plans for this center, where they've made arrangements with the local transportation of the Board of Education. So for example, I don't know if your town has a full day or a half-day kindergarten. Some towns that have a half-day kindergarten, they'll take an afternoon, children in the afternoon. My office in New Jersey, Livingston, New Jersey, is attached to one of these childcare centers, and I see the local school board run a short bus there in the afternoon to drop off children for aftercare. So typically, sometimes there is busing, but it's done by the local school board or the school board's transportation, and there's either a fee paid to them or arrangements made for it.
Andy,
Yes, sir.
what's the track record of learning centers, in terms of success? You said there's like 300 of them across the country?
Well, this particular brand has about 200+ operating, another 100 in development. In terms of failure success rate, the failure rate is very low. I don't know the exact statistics, so I designed the very first one for them, and I've done probably 90% of their centers. I'm aware of some centers that failed in the Detroit area during the recession, but I'm not familiar with any that have failed in New York or New Jersey area.
You've already done the marketing study?
Yeah, they do they do a very sophisticated marketing analysis. What they look for in general is about 5,000 children under the age of 5 within a 5-mile radius of the site. And they look for incomes in the $75,000 to $80,000 range and rising. So they have a very specific definition of the catchment area. These people are very sophisticated in terms of analyzing sites. They go through a very thorough analysis of it. And this is a lease facility, so they wouldn't approach the developer without knowing that it works for them. They also provide a guarantee to the developer on the rent, so they have to make sure it succeeds.
Did you say this was a tutor time?
No, this is a learning experience. What I said about Tutor Time is the owners of Learning Experience were the original Tutor Time company.
Hey, John, how specific would this be? In other words, if they didn't succeed, what else could go in there to this building under the institutional code?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Can it be limited to early child care?
The applicant needs a text amendment. So the board, should it choose to move forward on the application, will define the use comprising this new text amendment. So you have a variety of permitted uses for this rather limited zone, mixed-use zone. They have to add one. So that's why I asked the question about the institutional. That's a building code concept, and what are the requirements given the population. It doesn't affect the use that you approve by text amendment, which could then qualify. So the majority of the uses, were this to fail, that would be, on the plate, if you will, already exist. You're going to add one. I suspect you're going to narrowly define that use so that it mirrors this, so that if this use, if this applicant were to fail, you'd get one of the existing uses, or you would get the same use by a different applicant.
Okay.
Can I just add to that, too? You have a definition of child daycare center in your code. So the use is permitted already in your code, and it's actually permitted in the LI district. The problem that and this property is in the LI district. The reason we need the text amendment is because this property is being developed as a mixed-use expansion, and the child daycare center use is not a permitted use in the mixed-use expansion. So were this just being approved as the industrial center, then we wouldn't need the text amendment. But because of the way it's being proposed and approved, that's what gives rise to the need for the change for the child daycare center use.
So the answer is you do need a text
Yeah,
amendment.
we need,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
we do. No, we
And
do,
the
we do,
board can
but,
choose to do it in a manner that distinguishes it from childcare in the LI zone by adding a more narrowly defined use, if the board so chooses, as a mixed-use expansion.
yes, definitely. I just wanted you to know that it's not a use that's not allowed at all in the code. And we weren't proposing any changes to the parameters, but we can certainly talk about that. It just didn't occur to us that that would be necessary, but we'd certainly be open to it. And of course, all of this is subject to planning, to the amendment of your special permit, and also planning board site plan approval.
Thank you.
John, could you just do us a favor of reminding us the steps where the board inclined to move forward with this application, kind of what those steps would be? Eventually end up in a public hearing, and there's a change to the zoning of this particular type of zone. But what are those steps?
Well, you have to define the use that is being added to the list of uses as a mixed-use expansion. I frankly haven't looked at this since it was discussed, months ago. Jerry is saying that I think the lot and bulk controls, maybe are those that already exist. I mean, we'll have to look at it. But you identify the text change that you want to make. It's amending an existing local law, so you can only amend a local law by a local law, so you have a hearing. So you're going to, the law has to age, if you will, on your desks for 10 days. There is then a decision to move forward. You set your public hearing. You do circulation, has to go to the county planning department, probably to other agencies. You have a public hearing, and you're able to adopt it.
60 days, huh?
I guess the short answer, if you're looking for time, is it
60
can't be
days,
done in less than 60 days.
It's the number I had in my mind, John.
I don't think.
Any other discussion amongst the board members on this?
No?
Just speaking for myself, I think it seems like a reasonable proposal. I'd certainly want to hear what the planning board had to say about it in the circulation process and see exactly what the text amendment would be. And, but I would favor moving forward in some way to find out answers to the questions of exactly what the text amendment is, how it's defined, with the circulation of the planning board and so on. The site was previously approved for a shopping retail.
Big difference.
Switching it out for daycare seems like a benefit to the town, to me, in concept. As far as aesthetics go, we're talking one sign instead of 8 or 10. I know that many of us have little kids and need a safe place for them to be, so we can go to work. And so I understand the market demand for that, and it seems like a benign use. So I'd like to see the text and see what the planning board has to say about it.
So does that mean that we should provide you with more information? And if we're going to do that, and if there's a consensus among the board members that you might want to consider it, I'd like to package it with an application to amend the special permit so we don't have to go through 2 successive periods of referrals to county planning and referrals to the planning board, if you're amenable to that. And if
So-
we were to do that, we would update the EAF based on a site-specific project.
Speaking for myself, I'd like to see the package.
Do them simultaneously.
Yeah, whatever's the most
Yeah, you could do them
efficient
simultaneously.
method. The other town board members want to weigh in on this and.
I support
give
the
them some-
change.
I just want to see the proposed language for the use. I mean, that is really what I want to see.
Right.
I want to see the use defined, so that any concerns the board or our attorneys have can be addressed in advance.
I mean, the term is defined in the code, and
But
it's,
as John said, we might want to narrow that scope.
right.
Yeah, we just want to see the red line version, like, it always comes down to crossing out some words and adding some words in the zoning, so.
So how
we
does
just
she
wanna
But
see
we've
that.
provided that to you. I mean, we've provided you with a petition that tells you exactly what the text amendment would be. We didn't propose to change the definition of child daycare center. And if you wanted to do that, I mean, we can
We'd
talk
have to
about
look
it.
at
I
that,
just
yeah.
don't know where to start with that, because I don't know that it needs to be redefined. It requires licensing by the state. It means that you're there for more than 3 hours a day and less than 24. And it's a facility that requires the number of assistants that provide care for 7 or more children in accordance with a strict staff-child ratio. So I don't know that there's any aspect of that that requires changes in definition to be made. Is there a particular concern about an aspect of the operation that we should be thinking about and redrafting?
I think it's just a definition, that the technical aspects of which we're not immediately familiar, so everybody wants to look at it.
Okay.
Changes are needed.
All right. So, where does that leave us? If there's a concern
So
about the
if she has
definition of
the
childcare, we
definition
need,
already, should we just let our attorneys review it and get back to her with any proposed
yeah, that's in,
changes?
the definition's in our own town code, so
Right.
we would want to have our town attorneys look at that, see if there's something wrong with it.
Tom, what's our next step?
Well, what Jerry's saying is, because I don't have the petition. I got the petition, I don't have it.
Okay.
It's not in the backup. From what I'm hearing, the petition identifies the use and the parameters of the use. It's identical to that which exists in the code. So I think that the board, in consultation perhaps with myself and, with Jane, and with the applicant, we'll look at that. Is that what you desire to see, or certainly that you would be willing to approve for this site? And every time an application comes before you, you have the opportunity to revisit definitions and other areas of the code that are not always when you look at them a second time, what you hope they would have been the first time. So, yeah, so we have a petition. It's a discretionary legislative act for you to undertake that, to consider the petition, and we'll get back to the applicant in a timely fashion. Probably.
Yeah. We'll definitely get back to you.
Well, and what we can do is if putting a little bit more meat on the site plan and filing a formal special permit application with the details about parking and addressing traffic generation and parking demand and having a meaty EAF that addresses those specifics would be helpful in helping you think about, well, are there any limitations that we should be thinking about putting on this use? We're happy to do that. And that way, the two things would be reviewed at the same time.
Fine.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The board may want to consider two applications on a slightly staggered basis.
Oh, fine. But if we put it together, at least then you have something specific that you can be trying to apply
Right.
the
Just-
definition to.
Jerry, the parking for the people that would be working there, are they gonna have a designated area, or are they gonna be parking closer to the building, further away from the building? Do you have an area in mind for them to park at? No, that's where, they first said that that's where they would be dropping the kids off at.
Oh, you mean employee parking?
Yes, employee parking.
We haven't specified anything, but the logical way to address this is to have designated parking further away from the building, so
Yeah,
that the
that's
parking
something-
close to the building is reserved for parents dropping little children off, so that the children don't have to
Because
keep
I
running.
think the flow would be better if you did that, and just
Agreed.
because you've got about 8 spots in the front, you got some signage, that would be safer for the children, and, the employees would have to walk a little further, but I think it would work better as far as flow. You won't have as many people, I mean, even if you have the spots and maybe too many cars there, and then that's when you have the people, backed up behind the cars, and that's when you run into the problems with, put the parking brake on, and then, you're behind somebody, and you see it all the time.
Yeah, let us look at that. Let us put a little bit more specific information together. And then that, I think, can help you think about articulate better what might be a concern and how it operates. And I did hear that comment. I assume that's what you were getting at earlier, is let's talk about where staff would park, as opposed to, is there a way to reserve closer parking for, the short-term user?
Yep.
All right, good. Let us do that. We have had the traffic analysis done, so we'll provide all of that information in one package and hopefully be back before your board as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Our next item would be cutting over to public comment, public hearing, 8:03. Our town clerk would like to take attendance, so go ahead.
Councilman Troy,
Present.
Here.
Councilman Valentine.
Here.
Councilman Fatari.
Here.
Supervisor Stewart.
Here, thank you very much. So, if the town board is okay with it, we did have one public hearing proposed on the changes and increases in the penalties for violations, which was scheduled for, I think, 8:05.
Yep.
And it's 8:03.
Beautiful.
It's 8:04 now. So why don't we start that? I'll make a motion to open that public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. The text of this change to the town code is printed in the agenda. As mentioned earlier, it has to do with improving and sort of escalating fines for violations. We do have a sign-in sheet. I have one person who signed in to speak on this matter. After they have a chance to speak, I'll go by a raise of hands if anybody else wants to weigh in. The first individual signed in is Mr. Chris Day.
Thank you, Supervisor Stewart, Town Board. I wanted to speak briefly on this subject. First of all, I want to say the proposal is a great, solid proposal. It's an important tool that will be in the town's arsenal in order to make sure that corporations and LLCs and other partnerships with certain levels of revenue are able to actually be forced to do the right thing when they otherwise might not. I wanted to mention, I proposed a very similar proposition back in January of this year in a Journal News editorial. I'm proud to have joined Councilman Troy and Councilman Divney in including a very similar proposal in our plan to preserve Orangetown, and I'm really glad to see the town board taking it up now, tying the fines to the profit derived from, or the revenue derived from the actual violations is a good way to determine how you can actually force change. You see with Aloof, what's happened is a small fine. It doesn't cost as much as it would to shut down a whole line and fix it. You could see that in Ramapo with the LLCs that own slum housing. It costs a lot less money to pay the fines than it does to keep renting out and collecting that income from the illegal tenants or from an illegally subdivided home. So I just want to compliment Councilman Divney on this and say I'm proud to see it forth, and I strongly urge unanimous approval of this change to the town code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else here to speak on this? Chris, in the back there?
Good evening, Chris Dunnigan, Pearl River. I also want to just voice my support for this change. I think, thanks, Chris, for reminding me. Back in January, I think we both stood up here and said the same thing, that it was time to change this, to make the fines a little bit worse, to make sure that Orangetown keeps good neighbors. And this is the kind of tool that the town needs to leverage people to be good neighbors and prevent them from being bad neighbors to begin with. So I thank the board for taking this up, and I urge you to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else here to speak on this matter? Going once, going twice.
Motion to
We have a motion to close the public hearing from Councilman Divney, second from myself. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Then we have a couple of resolutions. We may as well just finish this now before we go to the public comment.
We're not going to vote on it?
Yeah, we are. I'm just saying,
That's what he's saying.
let's keep going. So number 3 is the lead agency and secret declaration under State Environmental Quality Review Act, where the town board is considering changing town code. It's assuming the role of lead agency for environmental review. After taking a look at the change and any potential environmental impacts that might result, it's concluded that there will be no significant environmental impact or effect caused by the proposed change, so therefore it's resolved that the town board would adopt a negative declaration under SECRA for this action, and also authorize town supervisor or his designee to execute the environmental assessment form and any other such steps that may be necessary to discharge the town board's responsibility as lead agency. I'll make a motion for this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Over here from Divney. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Number 4 is the actual adoption of the law. Tom, you want to say a word about this law before we adopt it?
Sure, thanks, Andy. I'd like to thank Chris Stay. He came to the board early this year to suggest action on this. I talked to Chris Dunnigan numerous times on this. I've had Rob Magrino help me, and Denise Sullivan did a lot of work on it. It's easy to come up with an idea and you know, look at other laws and draft something, and then you have to give it to the town attorney so they can do the research to see what we can do, what we can't do. Most of what I drafted is still in here. It increases fines for repeat offenders, so if you do something that violates town law, the first time there's a $5,000 fine. Second time in a 5-year period, it goes up to $7,500. Third time in a 7-year period, it goes up to $15,000. For corporations, same concept. The first time out, we have higher fines for corporations, $20,000. The second time they're convicted within a 5-year period, the fine goes up to $40,000. And then finally, on the third conviction, 2 more convictions within a period of 7 years, it goes up to $60,000. And these are per week. So these laws have teeth now, and that's what we need to preserve Orangetown. You need laws with teeth, and, you know, maybe it doesn't make sense to violate town laws where you can get hit with a $20,000 or $40,000 or $60,000 fine per week. And hopefully you know, it shows that Orangetown is not going to allow people or corporations to violate town law anymore. So I think we should vote on it and pass it, and, you know, and I thank the town attorneys, especially Denise Sullivan, who did a lot of research on to see what we can and cannot do.
Thanks for that, Tom. And so with that, I believe we need a motion for adoption.
Moved.
And second from over here, from Jerry Bottari. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Guys have it. Now, do we need to roll call on that? Nope.
I don't think so.
All in favor, say aye. We're done with that one.
Do we got to do the next one?
Um,
On the,
Okay, that's a separate issue. So let's get back to our public comment, which we usually do in the beginning of the meeting, but since we had a public hearing and we cut straight to the resolutions related to that.
is this for tonight or no? Proposal of law amending the chapter according planning board review about the antennas.
This whole thing was,
We'll just-
let's talk about it when we get to it.
All right.
So I want a motion to open the general public comment period. Do I have a second?
Second?
From Tiffany, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. So this is comments hopefully related to the agenda, but it's sort of open season.
That's the left.
And we have, I don't see Esther
She
Baitler
left
still
with,
here,
She left with Eileen.
so catch her next time. Watson Morgan, are you still here?
He's right there. Eileen left.
Good evening. Watson Morgan, Louisville resident, but I'm speaking today at the workshop last week. The Environmental Committee was convened this past Saturday, and we were talking about the potential of OMM purchasing Lot 1 specifically, and asking for a reduction in buffer to 100 feet. The initial, and for a long time, going back many, many years, and mirroring New Jersey's 300-foot setbacks to preserve a certain amount of tranquility along the reservoir and Hackensack River. 300 feet is more appropriate, and there are going to be some spots actually in the development of New York Sports Club where there's close to only 100 feet because of the way that the reservoir is configured or came about. We seriously believe that it should be 300 feet with some meandering walkways, perhaps some pavilions, and in the future, that property that we may need that for a recreation facility. We're the only township in Rockland County that doesn't have our own dedicated recreation center. This would be a perfect place to serve our community. The community is not just soccer. I appreciate soccer. My kids grew up in soccer for many, many years, going back 20, 30 years. The community is a lot more. I see a community sign saying, you know, all the wonderful things that soccer's done for the community, and it has. But the community is much greater than just soccer, I'm sorry to say. We have seniors, we have juniors, we have requirements or needs that we're in some ways using the school system for. But open space for people who are not soccer people. And this has always been on the minds of people. It's been in every proposition, whether it be Hovanian or anybody, even Stedge, bought into having a certain amount of space on their property so that we would have a proper, tranquil, peaceful transition to the reservoir. I think that should be done, and we should reserve Lot 1 for that purpose. The question in the discussion, why, if we've had you know, leasing agreements, and why do we need to make it taxable? But that's basically what it is, that we believe that it should maintain to be 300 feet, and that kind of knocks out a soccer field element.
Thank you. Watson, just finishing up, could you remind us who's, when you say "we," are you referring to a group
I
of people?
said the environmental committee.
Environmental Committee, okay.
And pretty much we were in a total agreement.
Okay. All
Thank
right,
you.
thanks for that report. Appreciate it. There's nobody else signed in for public comment? Yes, ma'am. Behind you, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have a chance to sign in.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Lee. I reside in 4 Piper Court in Blauvelt. Our property backs up to Bradley Corporate Park. I'm going to read this, which will help me. I need my glasses. We wanted to call to your attention a significant noise problem that we've been having. It happens consistently on Sundays. It's been going on for years. There's a congregation of dirt bikers and ATV vehicles in front of, I think it's called the Motor Company Building. It's along Bradley Hill Drive in Bradley Corporate Park. During this weekly event, they rev up their engines. It basically sounds like there's a drag race going on, behind our property. The noise level is such that it's really impossible for us to, spend any time outside. I've talked to my neighbors about it. They also agreed. We've been calling the police on Sunday to bring this to attention, to have them go back there. It could be even a safety issue. And just this past Sunday, it went on till about 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
We've written a letter. As I said, we've been calling the police on Sundays. We also send a letter to the building department. Mr. McPherson had replied to us and told us that based on video that we gave him, and we also have video here for you to take a look at. Two of the videos were actually from yesterday, and you will see yesterday there were about 10 of these vehicles there, and there was even a car trying to maneuver around this. So I could see even more
Was it
safety
yesterday
issue.
or you mean Sunday?
Sunday,
All right, just wanna
excuse me.
clear- all
I
right.
get my days mixed up. It's on Sunday, that was October 1st. So anyway, Mr. McPherson did see, based on the video, that there is definitely an issue here. He is writing a letter to Bradley Corporate Park, first of all, from either a zoning, whether it's a zoning issue, but it's also a noise issue. And I would also ask this group here, the town board, and also Mr. Stewart, whether we can look at amending the zoning. I understand it's light office industry that Bradley Corporate Park is zoned for. Could it be amended to state something about ATV vehicles not being permitted,
The first
in
thing to
that
do is
area?
find out if it's permitted at all. And that's what we need to find out. Yeah, Ed is working to figure out if it's actually permitted or not. And, but we
No,
agree, it's not a reasonable.
This is the second place in town that we've had this complaint too. We had the same complaint over in Tapan, where I
Okay.
guess they're behind the building over there too, so it's becoming a real concern.
Yes, yes.
Concern. Thank
Not
God
only
Jane
noise,
started on Monday.
So
Okay.
we,
So as next steps, we're waiting to hear back from Mr. McPherson.
Right.
But is there, could we also be pursuing in parallel any zoning restrictions, not not permitting ATV vehicles being?
Well, I think the first thing we got to do is look at the code and see what the code may already say that it's not allowed there. And if it's not allowed there, then we don't need to change the zoning. We just need to
Enforce.
start citing
it's
these guys
it's
and writing them
enforcement
up.
first.
Okay.
If the law isn't right, then you go to legislation, and then you
Thank
go
you
to
for
enforcement.
bringing that to our attention.
Okay, do you want
Thank you.
this
Please,
information?
please
We
leave
can
that
send
with
it.
us. That'd be great. And we received your letters.
3 videos, one from a couple of weeks ago, and the
Great.
other one from Sunday.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
We'll hold on to these and share it with the town board.
All right.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. I'm sorry about
Barbara
the
Dello has her hand
inconvenience.
up.
Mrs. Dello.
Hi, my name is Barbara Dello, and I wanted, first of all, to say I understand what that lady is talking about, and also that there's a concern about bicyclists on Sickletown Road. It's downright dangerous. The road is very narrow. And I saw one cyclist who needed an ambulance called that I stopped because I was a nurse. So I just wanted to say that's something else we could look at. But that's not the reason I'm here, so I'm going to talk. Most of the times I come here, I hear people coming with a lot of complaints, and sometimes even the rhetoric gets very nasty. So I wanted to take a minute to say that I appreciate this wonderful town, and we have this wonderful town in large part because of the planning and foresight of the leaders in our community. I want to take a moment to thank our existing town board and to look at what they've done and to appreciate their experience and skill in guiding us through some treacherous times. The Rockland Psychiatric Center redevelopment could have been a disaster in the hands of people who acted too quickly or fell prey to greedy real estate developers. Instead, we now have a low-impact, clean rateable that fits well in this mostly residential area. The town board has also dealt appropriately and steadily with the aloof problem, and I think the regulation law today is a good example of that. They are working diligently to solve the odor problem without joining the doomsday alarmists who cry toxic danger when in fact the smell is a nuisance but non-toxic. By being fair and thorough, they responded to community concerns and are fixing both violations and odors without exposing the town to costly lawsuits or, very importantly, frightening away needed ratables, which help with the tax burden. And I appreciate that before taking federal dollars, they make sure those dollars do not bring loss of local control or markedly increased development along with them. So, as we hear all the inflammatory rhetoric and untruths that have become so commonplace at sometimes these meetings, it might be wise to look around at the beautiful place we have and then to thank those whose steady hands have kept it so. So, in between all my complaints, I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Barbara.
you.
That's kind. By raise of hands, is anybody else here? Mr. Kleiner,
Tom Kleiner.
former town supervisor.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor. And I wanted to commend you and your team for coming in with a responsible tentative budget that again stays under the tax cap. And I know this is just the first salvo because the other members of the board over the next month will have the opportunity to weigh in on that. And I look forward to that process and then commenting further at the public hearing. But so far, so good. So thank you for that. But that isn't really what I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to say a word about somebody who you're adjourning in memory of, Ben Rzansky, who I think all the board has had the opportunity to meet, and certainly members of the community. And he was, among many other things, either a founder or a motivating force in the founding of the Orangeburg Library, the Orangetown Jewish Center, part of Camp Shanks, Jewish war veterans of Rockland. He was really an unusual guy. And certainly when I was supervisor, I had the opportunity to see him frequently, less so in the last 8 years or so, but in the last several weeks, once just walking door to door during the campaign, and then because of an issue that arose in the last several weeks, the substance of which is not, important for what I'm saying, but I had the opportunity to go to visit him and speak to him on the phone again a couple of times. And I really valued his advice and his guidance in that matter. And even at 94 years old, he was incredibly perceptive, and his advice, I think, was the right advice that I followed. And then we lost him just in the last few days. So I just wanted to wish, of course, condolences to his family and really to the whole community that has valued his service, first in World War II and then here in Orangetown after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
By the raise of hands, anybody else here to public comment?
Mike Mandel.
Mike Mandel.
Good evening, Supervisor Stewart, members of the town board. For the record, my name is Michael Mandel, resident of Pearl River. I usually don't agree with Watson Morgan on quite a few things, but in this case, I definitely do. If you look at the reservoir, which is a beautiful piece of property, you have a golf course on one side, so you can't make a park there. On the other side, you have, we're building, you have Anderson Field, you have Bright View coming in. You go up into Jersey, we have the, before you get into Jersey, on the other side opposite Bright View and American Legion Fields, you have the Point, or the club, or whatever its current name is. So the only place left where you can build a park where people can enjoy tranquility, overlooking the water, is that lot number 1. And 100 feet is not much property on which to do it. 300 feet is a much better space for meandering paths, plantings, benches for people to sit, and possibly the addition of a fishing pier off thing into the reservoir. Since we own part of that land under the reservoir, there should be no problem with that. If they're looking for more soccer fields, I think we do have additional property to the east of the current soccer fields. There's a triangle, I think is ours, I'm not sure. But I think that that piece of property should be preserved for the people of this town, because there are more than those that just play soccer. There are seniors that would like to enjoy it. There are other families that would like to enjoy it on a Sunday afternoon, to go out there and enjoy the tranquility. And this time of the year, that's a beautiful place to probably sit and enjoy the changing of the fall colors. So if you're considering it, I think this is something that we should maintain as part of our park space for our future of all the residents of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for the comment. Anybody else here to speak during public comment period? Not, Mr. Riff,
Just made it.
under the wire. Well, while Alan's walking up, I just want to thank you for your service as deputy town supervisor.
Thank you, Andy.
During my terms
Thanks,
here.
Thanks so much. 3 months ago, when the RPF for a park study was launched by this board, I stood here and urged what Mike just said about the need for a park. The Masonic home as we know it is not going to be there forever. It's a vital part of this town, but it could be developed for residential or something else. Lot 1 sits in the middle of the town. It's a jewel. We have the opportunity for a walkway and fishing stations along the reservoir. We have the opportunity to build a multi-purpose center that could be used for our seniors and our youth. In the future, we could have something like the Italian Festival or the Fesh, which may not have a home, that could have a home here. We could have a dog park. We could have quiet, passive land with nature walks and picnic tables. 30 years from now, and Dennis, 12 years ago, you called for a central park. This could be your central park. It wasn't a bad idea at the time, but people didn't realize everything that was involved with Rockland Psych, the cleanup, whatever. And I commend you for your thought at that time. But now you have the opportunity to make this a genuine central park, a mini central park, but a piece of land that will serve this community 30, 40, 50 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Is anybody else here to speak during public comment?
Motion to close.
Heather Hurley?
Hello, Heather Hurley, Pearl River. I was just wondering if the town board has received results from the stack tests yet, and in terms of interpreting them and the results that the DEC did send. So if there is somebody who's analyzing them, and that if the town board has any results for that yet, and if that person would distinguish whether or not it is actually a health threat with what's coming out, because I don't think that that's been proven yet. So just to state that. And also, if the town board wanted to know if they know when the switch-on date for the new equipment is. Has the DEC told that yet to the town board? And when that happens, if these odors are not mitigated, then what is the plan B? And does the town have a plan for that if this does not work? Because there were reports of noxious odors that were consistent with aloof odors reported as recently as 3:45, 4 o'clock today, that were also coming in yesterday. So just want to let the public know that the odors have not stopped. And what is the plan B, especially since the town has dismissed back in May all alleged violations by this company. So in terms of going forward, how is the town board or the town attorneys going to prove that going forward then now? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment period? Not seeing any hands up. I'll make a motion to close public comment period. Do I have a second over here? Dennis? All in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Would the town board members like to respond to any of the comments? I'm going to start over here. I usually start on the left. So Dennis, you want to start off?
I thank Mr. Riff for congratulating me or commending me on what I did, with RPC, through the years. That's Esther calling. Hold on.
She got your number.
She has it on speed dial. RPC has been a challenge all through the years, because of the economic downturn. And for me, the biggest thing that it did when we bought it was to protect the town from high-density development, and something we've definitely done. Now, it's obviously taken longer than we had thought. But in terms of my Central Park idea, when I am at the soccer fields on Sunday, and Saturday and Sunday with my grandkids, all right, and also with one of my granddaughters plays in South Orangetown Little League. It's a thing where, to me, it was a dream realized. And the fact that Mr. Divany brought in New York City Football Club, now that's not, for all the residents, but what happens is that partnership they will have with OMM, I think, is going to be a home run. The fact that we waited so long in terms of looking carefully at all development, what we ended up with is Chase. And that didn't happen by accident either, and that what we did, we became a town center for data centers, where we had 1547 critical systems on the other side of Veterans. You have Bloomberg on the other side of Veterans. And it's a thing where then the lights go on, and Chase goes, hey, we would like to come into RPC. So my biggest concerns were not so much that the whole thing ends up being Central Park. My bigger concern is what type of development goes in there. And it's still, that concern still remains, because we still have Rockland Children's Psychiatric still laying out there, with the state having control of that, and also with the staff court. So we're not done yet. And in terms of where a community center would go, all right, we as a board have talked about that. There are other locations that we have where we can put a community center. I support putting in a community center. I've run basketball through the years up in Haverstraw and West Haverstraw, where they have Butler buildings that they have as community centers and basketball courts, senior meetings, so something like that we can do, and we will do it, whether it's in RPC or on the other side of Veterans. So we are thinking about it. It's not dead yet, but I appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Jerry?
Just to, I guess, to piggyback on that, someone mentioned to me they were up in Clarkstown, and the centers that were there were wonderful. They went in to use the facilities while they were walking around one of the parks, and we have spoken about that, and hopefully we will get a center in here. It's long overdue. The seniors in Pearl River, I know, are looking for a place to meet, and that would work out for them as well. As far as the motorcycles or the dirt bikes go, we've had a problem, not so much on the McGee property there, but Bradley, but over down in Tapan as well. And that's private property owned by someone that was giving them permission. They had the insurance and so on and so forth. We're starting to get complaints from that area as well. I did speak with the police department members there. They are documenting everything that's going on there. I'd love to see the video that you have, and we'll take a look at it later. The owner of the property allegedly gave them permission to be there. However, the buildings and the companies that are there, I would think, would have some control over what's on their property as opposed to the others. So that's something that's being looked into, and it has to go into further. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Just to pick up where Jerry and Dennis left off, in partial answer to Heather Hurley's question about aloof, the town has initiated another set of violations on recent odor complaints, and the analysis of the results of that stack test are outstanding. And I think we need to take a look at whether and how that contract will provide for interpretation and analysis, or maybe we need to get someone else to do it.
No,
Yeah, do you have an answer to that?
well, the DEC, you said they wanted them to.
So we'll give our results to the DEC, right?
No, well, the DEC talked to TRC. And they said to TRC, did you test for acrylamide? And I don't think they did, so now they're just calculating that chemical, which they can easily do, and they're gonna have the analysis sooner rather than later. My understanding is that the prefabricated part will be going in by October 10th. That was what we were told. I did speak to counsel for Aloof last week, and he did send a memo, and he said it's the date they're looking to get it in there is October 10th. They need this particular part to be installed before they can turn on the system. That was from counsel for Aloof. As far as RPC.
I just wanted to finish. So,
all right.
But that was good that we filled that in. The question about first of all, I want to thank Tom for telling everybody that we came in under the tax cap. It is a priority for this whole town board to try to save money wherever possible and avoid raising taxes wherever possible. So our budget is under the tax cap by a good deal of money, and we need to try to keep it there through final approval in November. On the RPC, as I'm sure Tom was just about to reflect on, it very well could be that Lot 1's big enough for both public and private development. But I think that the main thing we need to keep in mind is the town's needs come first, and we need to make a plan, finalize a waterfront park plan that really meets the town's needs for any other facilities, whether it's a rec center or related, and make sure we've got that squared away before we sell any more land. And that was my response last meeting when Orangetown Mighty Men just came in, again with their offer and interest, which is well understood and known, to expand their operations further onto town land. So I agree with Watson and Michael and Alan in reminding us of how precious the remaining publicly owned land on the Rockland Hospital campus is, especially that land that has waterfront views, and really look forward to providing a kind of a concept plan for a waterfront park within the next week or two. And then finally, I just wanted to say that the motorbike thing really seems out of control over at Bradley, and my guess is that it's a violation of town code, and be assured that the building department is looking at it. When people complaints, when they send a letter, when they give us evidence, and we get that from time to time, and the town really does follow up diligently. The folks of the building department really do. And we had another case recently where we've had building department there, we've had town engineer looking at environmental, we've had the public health department, so we focus efforts on trying to get sites which have nuisance conditions cleaned up. And many times they can be addressed through existing code, but when there's a gap in the code, and we all learn from that, we can go through a hearing process and amend it as needed. And we're doing that all the time as well. I'll mention that we're currently working very closely with an environmental chemist to tackle some of the deeper issues underlying the community's concern with the noxious fumes from Aloof and other places, to make sure that our town code has very outdated standards when it comes to the measurement of noise, vibration, particulate matter, other kinds of emissions. And they literally cite standards going back to the 50s or earlier. And some of them may be fine, and others are desperately in need of being updated. And so we're working with Sandra Bonneville, who the town board hired to consult with the town on this topic, and also to provide expert review of the permitting process that the DEC is doing with the Aloof, to make sure that we're really on that. And so we do have a process. It's going to take a little longer than some other kinds of code revisions because they're technical and kind of get into science a little bit. But we hope to have a series of proposals related to tightening up the performance standards for emissions and other potential contaminants within the near future as well. So I just wanted to mention that. We're actually going to invite, as soon as we have a little more on the table with Sander and from internal staff and our town attorneys working on that, to put some things together and work with our new head of our building department to invite some of the folks who are involved with advocating for clean air in the town to come in and kind of review our work and help us to come forward with some proposals for updating the town code before the end of the year. So I just want to mention that. I also want to thank Vicki and Alan and others, the town attorneys, and Sandra Bonneville. And I think Tom was involved in our last meeting to really kind of push forward with what is a pretty complex issue of kind of working within a town code which is focused on zoning, in as much as it pertains to industrial processes, which really are kind of a technology regulation question, which is usually more a question for the EPA or the DEC. But our own town code does have performance standards, and we do have the authority to regulate industrial processes, and we want to make sure we're doing it in a way that's sufficient to protect the public health at all times. So I just want to mention that.
Okay.
Paul or Tom?
Yep. Andy, thank you for reminding me about Sander. You know, he's presently reviewing our codes regarding health, safety, and welfare and environmental processes. We got TRC reviewing data from samples that are being taken throughout town. We've been in touch with George Swikert at the DEC, who has been a very useful resource for this town. He goes out there when he gets complaints. He was out there last Monday. I was on the phone with him on Tuesday. He's very responsive to the needs of the people in the town and the town itself. It's been a long journey, and myself and the rest of the town board realized that, it's frustrating. I was on the phone with a person who lives in the area of Aloof, and she's very frustrated, and she just wants the odor to go away, and I can't wait for that to happen. And she's been waiting a long time, and I hope, and I'm very hopeful that once they put this prefabricated piece in, that does a lot to alleviate what's going on. Again, the town voted to have TRC measure the air around there. We have the DEC hopefully coming back with their stack test. The TRC should have their analysis any day. So we're doing our best, and we know you're frustrated, but we're going to continue to work because we want to resolve this issue. And that leads me to the healthcare engineer. We've been trying to fill this position forever now. I was on the phone with Joe today. One of the more qualified applicants has decided that they don't want the job now. We have one applicant who we thought would be qualified that the county just said wasn't. Joe's trying to arrange a meeting this week so we can meet with county personnel to plead our case. We need to fill this position, or we're going to have to either increase the salary or do a engineer 2 position with merge with a healthcare engineer, which is not really what we want. So hopefully we can convince the county to see our way, because we need the relief so we can get in there to work with Jane Slavin, the new head of building, and with Sander to revise the codes and to be a liaison to the people in this town. And then as far as RPC, nothing's set in stone. There's no decisions. We allow anyone to present in front of the town board. We've done 20, 30. Andy has a presentation from developers, and each one on this board has met with many developers regarding what they want to do at RPC. Paul and I met with some gentleman years ago who was going to buy all the buildings, and he gave us his website address. I went to the website address. It didn't exist. I realized this is not the guy that's going to be buying it. But we've met some legit businessmen and some business owners that had proposals that we didn't want there, such as Lego. The whole board met with Lego. I think Alan was there, and we had some serious concerns about how they were gonna bus people in and how it would affect the neighborhood and idling buses and the removal of garbage and debris, and we basically said, you know what? We don't want you here. The town doesn't want you here. So it's an ongoing process. Nothing's set in stone. There's a lot of land there to be developed. I'm not sure they're gonna give us relief. I don't think the state is gonna relieve us from the restrictions on that land right now. I think it's incumbent on this board to designate what's gonna be developed and designate what's not gonna be developed. We have a lot of land on the waterfront, and, you know, I would like to see some of that dedicated to a public park with fishing piers. Some of it may be sold, some of it may not, but we've got to take the stance that, you know what, the state, if they wanted to help us out, I think they would have done it already. They haven't. So the town's got to move forward and start designating what's going to be sold off, what's going to remain open space. And with Chase taking up, what is it, how many, 60? 60, we only have about 60 acres left that we can do, and then the rest has to be designated as parkland or for public purposes. And that's what we're going to have to do. I'm not confident the state's going to give us the relief.
Okay, I'll be quick, since everybody else pretty much covered most of the bases. I agree, we need more than a 100-foot buffer. I don't know if 300 foot's the number, but it's definitely should be more than 100 foot. I always was a proponent of the waterfront park. I would like it to go from Convent Road all the way over to Old Orangeburg Road. I think it's important, it's in my area, and I would probably use it. So I support that fully. As far as the dirt bikers, Mrs. Lee, I agree with you, and they're going to check the codes to see if it's permitted. I can't believe that it would be permitted, and I can't believe they would allow it, because it seems to me the liability on the property owners would be tremendous. Maybe they don't know what's going on, or they're turning a blind eye, because something, but we'll look into that, and I agree with you. You are the second complaint. It's been on two different ends of the town. Tom Kleiner. Ben Rajansky was an honorable man, a stand-up veteran, and a guy that I was proud to call my friend, and you gave some very good words to him, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure his family does too. As far as Aloof, we've been working diligently, and I know that it doesn't appear that way, and people get angry and don't think that, think we should go down and just padlock the doors. It just doesn't work that way. And I get frustrated more than most because I'm used to working in real life when you can get things done very quickly. In government, nothing moves quickly. Every time we make a decision, it takes months, and there's a process and public input, and you can't just padlock doors on a company that's been here since, I think, the late 70s or early 80s. But we can regulate them back into compliance. And that's what we've been working diligently on. And I know it seems like it's taken a long time. It's been about a year, I guess, since Allison brought that to our attention. Maybe longer, maybe a year and a half. But it has been a constant, we have been working constantly on this. It's not something that's put on the back burner. It's not something that we're turning a blind eye to. We read every one of the emails and every one of the complaints. What would have happened if the case, we keep hearing about how these fines were dismissed. The fines were not dismissed. They paid a fine. They said that they agreed to pay the fine as long as they didn't admit guilt. But that doesn't mean that you can't start refining them again. And the feeling that the town attorney told us, why he did that, was that they were going to postpone the case till after the admissions tests were done. So we weren't gaining anything by having him postpone the case, because we can actually just bring new charges right after the admission is done, and you could go through the process again. So we didn't really gain or lose anything by him settling that. It wasn't what we wanted to have happen. It's what did happen. He used his best judgment, which really wasn't what the board desired. We would have rather had the judge make a decision and I forgot, they put a stay on it until after the stack was built and then see if there still smells. But new fines can be, as soon as that is in place, if the complaints start again, new fines can be levied against the company, and they can be taken back to court and fined under the new fine structure, which I thank Tom for putting together. So we are working diligently on it. I know some people don't feel that is the case, but it is the case. I live in this community. I live in this community with my kids and my grandkids. I work in this community. I'm never more than 1.5 miles from Aloof, 23 hours out of the day. So it's a real concern to me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to move on with our agenda. I think we left off at item number 5. Item number 5 sets a public hearing date for November 28th on a revision to the town code regarding how antennas are permitted. And I won't go into the details. It's available there, but there's a red line version. It shows the amendments, and essentially, existing code provides for a somewhat expedited approval process in non-residential commercial areas, and the revisions would make a more robust approval or regulation process, whether it's in non-residential or residential. And
Just so everyone, right now, it's just, your approval process is just for commercial areas, and we're amending it to include all commercial and residential areas.
it also provides for the applicant to provide funds for any technical experts that might be needed and so on. And it's a good proposal, and we'll have a public hearing on it on the date specified. So the motion would be to set the public hearing. I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
From Divany, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So that's for November 28th. The next item is also setting a public hearing. This is a public hearing for the Blauvelt Fire District's budget of October 17th. I'll make a motion for this. Do I have a second over here? From Jerry Batari, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. Number 7 also sets a public hearing. This is the one having to do with regulating the mechanics working on cars in their private residential driveways. And the public hearing will be set for November 14th, and the text of the town code and the proposed revisions are included in the agenda tonight. Do I hear a motion over here for setting this public hearing for November 14th? From Councilman Divany, second from Paul Valentine. All in favor, say aye.
And just,
Okay.
just for a little background, this is a law that I drafted just because there's a loophole in the property maintenance law where you can work on cars 24/7 in residential areas. Basically, run a commercial repair shop in your driveway and do it on weekends and interfere with a lot of the residents in certain areas of Orangetown. So I talked to a number of people on this, and it makes sense. There shouldn't be any commercial or for hire automotive repairs being made in a residential district. And
Well, thank you for that.
people that called me know who they are.
So I believe we had a vote on that. So number 8 is, and now we're getting into some more on the level of housekeeping, a couple items. Number 8 is lend assistance for Team KJ Duathlon on October 8th. Do I hear a motion for this from Councilman Divany? A second over here from Dennis Troy. All in favor, say aye. Number 9 is the surplusing of highway equipment. I'll make a motion for this. Here, a second from Jerry. All in favor, say aye. Number 10 is Showmobile for South Orangetown Day on October 14th, a wonderful event. I'll hear a motion over here from Paul Valentine on that. Second from Councilman Divany. All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Number 11 may require some discussion. This is the item we've discussed actually a number of times where we would offer to the assistant wastewater treatment plant operators the opportunity to be upgraded from a salary at a grade 14 to a higher grade if they pass a DEC test that would give them a license of wastewater 3, which the town is anticipated to need wastewater 3 licensees as assistant operators in the not too distant future. And so wanted to create an incentive for employees to pass that exam in terms of a higher salary. And there's description in here. Is Joe Moran still here? No. Joe, do you want to just come up in case town board members have questions? I see Michael Weber, too, our chief operator.
Are you making, Andy, are you making an amendment on this, that you're modifying from 17 to 16?
I wrote 16 in here.
Yeah, well, we workshop 17.
We workshop 17, and I would like to hear from Joe Moran.
Well, I'm just saying, why cross it out? The procedure would be to make an amendment that you are proposing to go from 17 to 16, because the workshop item was 17.
You may be right about that. My intent, as you correctly read, is to offer this resolution at a 16. But Joe, we asked you last week to provide some backup information as to, I think you were pitching it at a 17. They're currently 14, so it's a substantial raise to go from a 14 to a 17 in the union contract. And I know that the reasoning, you did have reasoning behind that. Why shouldn't we sort of split the difference and go for a 15 or a 16 instead?
Well, the raise to go to a 17 from a 14 is approximately 4.7%. The difference between a 16 and a 17 is that there's one additional step as they near retirement. That's the only difference.
Wait, what? The
Between a
difference-
16 and a grade 16 and a grade 17. There's one more step that they will get one more step increase right before they retire after 30 years of service.
But what are you
That's-
recommending?
I recommend that position is commensurate with a grade 17.
And the reason for that is?
Reason for that is they will need to monitor and sample additional equipment, effluent discharges that will be required by new York State DEC regulations. The grade 3 certification requires more knowledge of the treatment process. It's been a very hard to recruit position because of the difficult qualifications. A previous director set up a training program about 8-9 years ago, and with good foresight and good ideas in mind, and we still have no grade 3 operators despite that effort. It's a proactive approach. We know that in approximately 2 years, the shift operators will have to be grade 3s instead of scrambling and advertising and trying to find grade 3 operators, like we've been having problems trying to find a public health engineer and risking fines from the DEC for not having qualified individuals. It's better to have this approach and pay them at this level when they achieve the grade 3. And again, as we discussed, this isn't effective until they get the certification. So nobody says they're getting the certification next month or 6 months. The anticipation is that by the time the DEC requires these individuals to have the grade 3 certification, they'll have it, and the town will be in compliance with state regulations. Additionally, a grade 3, if somebody achieved their grade 3 certification now, they could step in and act as the chief operator in his absence, if that was ever required. Well, God forbid he had an extended leave of absence for whatever personal reason, a grade 3 could fill right in for that position. That's a big advantage to the town. So,
I don't think there's any doubt that having a grade 3 is an advantage to the town. The only question I had was, why can't we just go with a 16? It seems like a reasonable incentive. Nobody knows for sure what a sufficient incentive is, but certainly a 2-grade increase would qualify as an incentive in most people's minds. What is the rationale to go for a 3-grade increase?
the grade 1s are grade 11s, the grade 2s are grade 14s. It's a logical progression to go to grade 17, plus they do supervise the grade 1s, and they may have to supervise other individuals also, which is a supervisory pay grade right now is a 17 in the department.
We know, though, that the minute someone passes the DC exam, which we hope they do, and which we want to incentivize them to do, their job actually doesn't change at all. It hasn't added to the number of people they're supervising. It hasn't changed the complexity of their job. It's given them a license that we might need later. and that they can fill in for the chief operator, which is great. So what new, you seem to be implying there's a new supervisory role that's going to happen just because somebody has taken a test, which we do want them to take and pass. Is that what I'm understanding you to say? There's new supervisory responsibilities the day they finish that test?
No.
Okay.
They still have the same supervisory responsibilities, and they have supervisory responsibilities now.
Okay.
Like I just
As a
mentioned.
grade 14.
And supervisors are paid at grade 17 in the department at this point.
Okay. All right. Anybody,
Yeah,
Paul?
Joe, what is the county level 3 operators? I asked you that, if you can give me that information. Are you able to do that?
Yes. I'm going to defer to Mike Weber. He formerly worked for Rockland County. He was a grade 3 shift operator there and is a grade 4 shift operator now. So I'm going to ask Mike to help out with those questions.
Supervisor, Councilman, how are you? So far as the pay grades that take place in the county, obviously, when we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, a shift operator in Rockland County is paid at a pay grade 57. Their pay grades vary from what the town pay grades do according to the contract. Comparing that then based upon other job titles that the town has that are similar to job titles that the county has, you'd end up having supervisors that are actually above the level of an operator, such as Steve Fordham or you have Tom Fitzmaurice, which they do have titles that are higher than that, which would be a pay grade 57 with inside of the county, or pay grade 60 for Tom Fitzmaurice level of expertise. And then you also have other mechanics that would fall into supervisory positions as well, such as the pay grade that would be where Art Higgins ends up being, which would probably be about a pay grade 53, which is actually lower than what the pay grade of an operator is. The pay grade for an operator is a 57 compared to a 53. So there is already a disparity there. Operators are being paid more for that supervisory position because they are supervising a system. It's not only supervising employees. And upcoming, when the changes inside the plant take place, we're going to actually see that there's going to be more process control issues that are going to be related to the job that they're going to be doing as well. They're going to be responsible for bionutrient removal, which is going to increase the level of difficulty that's actually going to be on their day-to-day basis. So these are things that they haven't even approached yet, and that skill level is going to have to be approached with them. I'm hoping to be able, go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off. Dollars and cents.
Dollars and cents, well.
17, I don't really give a crap. How do their salaries?
Okay,
Are they paid more here or less? That's all.
Not
Supervisor, what does a grade 3 operator at the county get paid compared to a grade 3 operator at the town?
They pay it based upon, I bought the contract here, so if you want to take a look at that, I can end up showing you that. Comparatively, they actually pay it on an hourly basis. Pay grade 57, which is a grade 3 operator over there, starting pay is $27 an hour, more or less, and they top out at $39 an hour. And that's after a 25-year service, which most of the current operators would probably be falling into. And comparing that then to a pay grade 17, which we do have in the plant, Art Higgins is a pay grade 17. His pay grade in the county would actually be lower than the operators there.
How much
So
does he get paid per hour?
the pay grade 53 there would be paid, would be starting at $22 an hour and topping out at $32.45 an hour for a pay grade 17 with inside the county.
That's a grade, that's 17.
Yes.
What about our assistant operators who are, right, okay, so.
An operator would be.
Basically, you're saying if the operators were to go to a 17, that they would be earning less than what the equivalent position at the county, or is it the opposite?
Pay grade 17, equivalent position for the maintenance mechanic 1 that they end up having there, which is basically the same position that the sewer systems mechanic would be the same equivalent position with inside of the county, and at that point in time, it would be paid at a lower pay grade than an operator gets paid.
You're comparing mechanics to operators, but
It's
Paul
not
was asking
mechanics,
just
it's based upon.
assistant operator here, assistant operator there.
Obviously, the title description is different because supervisor, the next supervisor up, which would be like Steve Fordham's position, is actually a sewer system mechanic 2. They have a sewer system supervisor, which would be Tom Fitzmoore's position. At that point in time, he's being paid at a pay grade 60. So the verbiage is different so far as the title name is concerned, but they don't have the exact same titles. So there's no.
It's very hard to compare, in short. It's very hard to compare.
I'm talking about degree of responsibility. What is required for each of those positions, and those are the positions that are balancing out when you end up comparing the job description to job description is what you're going to end up having there.
So it's hard to compare, basically.
One other question. We're getting a new clarification.
Chlorination. It's a dechlorination and chlorination
Dechlorination system.
That's correct.
If we don't get raised, our plant doesn't get raised to the next level,
Mhm.
our operators have to learn how to operate that equipment now.
They're going to have to learn how to operate,
And they're going to have the
calibrate.
responsibility of operating that equipment.
Yes, they are. They're going to have that additional responsibility for the chlorination equipment. And it's not only the chlorination equipment, but it's also what the Speedies is projecting for the near future, within 1.5 years, probably.
So it really doesn't change.
I'm sorry?
It really doesn't change.
That they're going
Whether
to
they're
be.
grade 2 or grade 3, they're still going to be responsible for all the same equipment
No,
and the new equipment.
the difference being is when the plant does change, and this is being proactive at this point in time. The
No.
plant is going to change, and it's going to become a grade 4 plant, not due to chlorination only, but due to other issues which the DEC has mandated at this point in time. So when we're facing those particular issues, if we're not proactive at this point in time, it's going to be impossible to fill those positions. It took 4 years for the county to find 2 operators to fill the positions that they had there. And one of them came down from upstate in Rochester to end up coming down here, and he still commutes there from Rochester in order to get that position. And it's not an easy, like I said, not an easy position to fill. My position still hasn't been filled, and they're having difficulty filling that position as well, because grade 3 operators are far and few in between. There are not many that pass the test. The passing rate is probably about 10% on the first try of people that will actually pass that particular test. So when we end up going up to a grade 4 plant, which requires now that we have grade 3 operators within inside of it, then it's going to end up being something that we're either not going to be able to meet the requirements that are met by DEC, and if we're not proactive, we're probably not going to be, and then we're going to be looking at that point in time to scramble around also to be raising the salaries again in order to attract talent away from other municipalities which pay higher. And that's really what it's going to end up coming down to. And that's something that I believe is what I've seen in Westchester. I've seen it here. If we wait until the last minute, we're not going to be able to fill those positions. And in this plant, it differs from Rockland County, because Rockland County had grade 3 operators when those positions became vacant. So they were able to still maintain the Speedies permit, because in the absence of the chief operator, there were grade 3 operators already there, working overtime, a lot of overtime, and being paid at that particular salary. In fact, the operators that were there were actually grandfathered into a much higher salary base than the current operators are being paid. So,
Our operators make a lot of overtime too.
yes, but we've also hired a new operator into the plant that's going to cut back on, I believe, quite a bit of that overtime at this point in
Thank
time. Thank you.
Oh, I got a question. So when this chlorination starts, are the existing operators, are they going to be required to do more than they are right now in the contract?
They are going to be required to operate and maintain new equipment. It's not going to be changing the job specification so far as the chlorination equipment is concerned, if that's what you're asking. But it's going to be different equipment that they're currently not using. It is a more advanced system that requires more oversight.
But it's within their job description to do that.
That particular
And the fact of the
task
matter
is-
is, it's not uncommon for people to have to learn new things
Understood.
for a job in the town.
The one period that is going to change is when the plant process changes.
When the DEC upgrades the plant, you're
Which-
going to need a new license.
Yes, and not just new license, but a completely different process. The way in which the sludge, the sewage, is being treated inside the plant is going to be doing bionutrient removal, which is something which is not included within inside of their job description. That is a different type of of operation at that point in time and requires a higher degree of skill.
Right now,
And then money come with an 18. That's not. Well, they still might do it anyway.
I think that needs to be researched.
Okay.
I would propose that the town board pass this resolution to create an incentive for people to take the test and get paid a little extra in preparation for when the plant gets upgraded. But I would propose a grade 16 as a compromise, since that's 2 grades higher than their existing.
So you're making an amendment to change 17 to 16?
Right. That's one way of putting it. All right, as it reads on the resolution right here, at the end of the detailed description of the incentive program, it says, resolve the assistant plant operators with a grade 3 certification, if they take the test and pass it, be paid at a CSEA contract grade of a 16.
So do you have a second on that?
I'll second.
Before you,
Go ahead, John.
that's right. Listen, you can make it a, you know, a 16, you make it a 26, you make it a 56. The fact of the matter is, you're going to amend the resolution to reflect that it's subject to negotiation. We've been through this before. You cannot unilaterally change, even for the better, a term and condition of employment. That's why the discussion in the past, in fact, I believe the very regulation at 16 is out there in a resolution somewhere from years past, and it was not ratified, if you will, through negotiation by the union. So we're running in place here.
One of the reasons that wasn't ratified at that time, because there was another part to that where people had grievances, and they weren't giving up the grievances, which was part of going to the 16. So, to me, this is still a management issue in terms of planning ahead, and that's why it was set at 17. We have nobody who qualifies for it now. We had this discussion 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and it's an incentive to have people within the sewer department to actually take the time to do the training, to do the studying, and to take the tests, whether it's 1 time, 2 times, or 3 times, that we are preparing for when the rating on the sewer plant changes. So, to me, and again, you can, John, if you need to add the language that
we just do comma
it
subject
has to
to
be
CSEA
resolved,
approval?
with the union, that's fine, that's fine, I agree with that, but I still say it should be 17. And so we can vote on your amendment.
Okay, let's do that. Then we can move on. Because I think most of us agree that we want to see the incentive in place, and that's why we ask questions about what grade would be appropriate.
Well, it took a long time to get to that, so I'm happy with that.
So as amended, I made a motion. I think I got a second from Paul.
Second. So on that
Who's-
amendment,
You want to take a roll call, Charlie, so we can see who's going to support this, or we're going to change it again?
Supervisor Stewart?
Yes?
Councilman Valentine?
Yes.
Councilman Troy?
no.
Councilman Vitari?
No.
And Councilman Dipney?
No.
All right, so that fails.
So on the original motion on the 17,
Do I hear a motion for the, having it be grade 17? Dennis?
Second.
Here, second from Tom Divany.
You want a roll call?
All those in favor say aye. You want to have a roll call?
But does, you know what the vote's gonna be?
Yeah, go ahead. Do a roll call, that's fine.
Well, the thing is, you
no,
can
you
vote
said
no.
everybody was in favor, so.
Listen, I've been
Have the
trying to
vote.
get a healthcare engineer for 6 months. We had 2 applicants, and the salary was at $87,000, and we don't have anyone applying for these jobs. I don't know why.
The difference is these guys are the highest paid guys at the sewer department, not in their salary, but because of their overtime.
And we hired someone.
And
we-
if there's not an incentive to be the highest paid guy in your department, I don't know what other incentive you could want. Yes, you have to work overtime to be the highest paid, I got it, Dennis.
It's
That's a
the
pretty damn good
incentive, the incentive is to get to the grade 3. That's the incentive, not just to be the highest paid.
But we can't get people to fill the grade 2, who are the highest paid.
The point is,
So if you can't get people to fill the grade 2,
Paul.
who are the only ones who are entitled to overtime, how is 2 grades or 3 grades,
The way,
we have to go outside the higher grade
No,
2?
the
Because none
point-
of our buddies wanted to go up and take the test for the grade 2.
the point is, within the sewer department or within other departments, there may be people who would go into that chain of job titles.
I think what Dennis
if they
is-
have an incentive to go to 17.
If,
And then maybe
So
we
you
should make
may
it
get
20.
different people who want to be wastewater operators. That's the point.
Well, the point is, we want to have an incentive. There's a disagreement over what constitutes an incentive that's adequate. The fact of the matter is, nobody really knows, because there's a dearth of these operators out there, and they're hard to find. But the town board majority is going to vote for 17,
Yeah, well,
and
I
we'll see
mean,
if it works.
Andy,
So why don't we
I mean,
finish the vote?
John pointed out that the 16's already out there, and no one, the CSEA hasn't agreed to take the 16 because they don't think any of their members are going to come forward. I mean,
Well, it's subject to CSEA approval.
Yes, it
So
is.
that's added to the resolution. So after the number 17, it'll be subject to CSEA.
Councilman Troy,
Yes.
Councilman Dipney,
yes.
all right, Councilman Vittori,
Yes?
all right, Councilman Dipney,
No, Valentine.
Councilman Valentine.
No.
Thank you. And Supervisor Stewart.
No, with the specific understanding that I support creating an incentive, but I don't buy the rationale for the 17.
But you buy it for the 16. Okay.
Number 12, thank you, Michael and Joe, for making the case. I think it was good. The distinction between the grades, to me, wasn't persuasive. Number 12, this is approving the recommendation for restricting parking on Forest Ave and Pearl River for 6-month trial. This is from a recommendation by the Traffic Advisory Board, and it's described in here.
All right, moved.
Motion from Divany, second from Troy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 13 is lending assistance for a 5K walk-run on October 22nd to rally folks for clean air and against tobacco. I'll make a motion for this. Do I hear a second? From Jerry, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 14, this is the, another ride. This is to end cancer on October 17th. Do I have a motion over here?
Moved.
For that, Councilman Divany, second for Bill Valentine. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 15 is, this is our closing on the land sale of 60 acres JP Morgan Chase is, everybody wants to get it done, but there are some easements that still need to be written to perfection for the closing to occur. So this is an extension on their access agreement so
John,
they can continue
John,
working
can you
there.
advise us where we are? Because I thought the easements weren't what was holding up. I thought it was more about HIPAA and the clearing of records. Now I'm hearing it's back to the easements.
Many easements.
No, I know there's many easements, but I thought they were going to hold documents in escrow and we were going to close.
We're working together, and hopefully we're close. It is the easement issue. The records have been removed. We need, and JP Morgan Chase also wants, some type of certification in one form or another that all records have been removed.
Okay.
But the immediate issue are the easements, including access along Third Avenue, access for the town across the church property. The easements have been drafted. They're being reviewed by the Office of Governmental Services. So, a number of layers at the state level have to approve it, but fingers crossed,
Time frame?
10 days.
10 days?
But what do I know? I've been
Nothing's,
here 14 years
nothing's
doing it.
ever easy with the
Knock
state.
on wood.
Designate that parkland.
I'll make a motion for the extension of the access agreement. Do I hear a second? Over here.
Just to change,
I'm sorry.
last paragraph, I'm saying additional named insured, just strike the word name purposes of.
Okay, where is that? Okay, additional insured.
Additional insured, second to last line.
Second to last line. You see that, Charlie? There's in quotes, additional named insured, and we're striking out the word named.
All right.
So do I hear a second over
Second.
here from Paul Valentine?
All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I will say, I realize it may not be a popular position, but in defense of the state of New York, these guys at Office of Mental Health, at Empire State Development, at the Office of General Services, they haven't been perfect, and nobody is, but they've been very, very diligent through this process. They've seen the value of it. We've seen the value of it. The bank
Then
certainly
they-
sees the value of it.
If they see the
And-
value of it, get it done.
And we are getting it done.
No,
And-
well, obviously,
I'm
no.
just saying, because I feel like oftentimes people criticize it, and the fact is
The state
that
for
this-
dragging their heels, this is,
there's much to criticize, but
I don't know.
But Ed Colleen and Jen Huber at
a
Office of Mental
60
Health,
acre data center.
it's just, we have moved this thing at lightning speed.
I
through the
know,
approval
but
process.
here's the deal, get it done.
Now, look, it's never soon enough for all of us here, but I just want to be fair.
I don't know, it sounds like you're trying to get a job up there.
I am, but I'm trying to be fair too. You really have to be fair, and it's just simply true. I just got a meeting for Thursday morning with the whole crew from all those agencies to keep working on this thing. And
All right.
It used to take us 3 weeks to get a
You want a
meeting.
letter of recommendation?
Yeah. Number 16, set a public hearing October 17. This has to do with the library budgets. I thank Denise Sullivan for correcting a longstanding practice of not holding a public hearing on the library district. We do have public discussion. The budget is subject to public hearing, and they've made public presentations. But apparently, state law calls also for a public hearing. We're setting that for October 17th. I'll make a motion. Do I hear a second over here? Dennis, great lover of libraries. Do I have a second on setting a public hearing?
You never call me anything. Why do you call me for that?
I want to see your library. Jerry, can I get a second? over here?
Lover of libraries.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 17, lending assistance to the South Orangetown Day on October 14th. Do you hear a motion from Jerry Batari, second from Dennis? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 18, supporting the request from Walkway Heroes commemorative stone, which we heard from at workshop. And just making a quick correction to the title here, it should not say American Legion, it's just VFW. And we thank VFW 1516 for all their work, along with Robert Dell. And the project is described here for $3,000. And this is
I make a
an
motion.
approval from the town, from Paul Valentine, second from Dennis Troy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. And don't forget, the 50th anniversary is coming up, and there will be an event on, it's November 5th, right? November 5th at 10 o'clock at the Walkway of Heroes, followed by some coffee and donuts right here in the lobby where all of the historical photographs of Camp Shanks are going to be put on public display. Number 19 is, 19 and 20 are both grant application approvals. Vicky has done a great job working with our highway department, getting some commitments between myself, working on Ellen Jaffe. And Ellen Jaffe has really been great with sidewalks and road improvements for the town of Orangetown, as has Senator Carlucci. These two projects are the first one is for a critical sidewalk on Oak Tree Road between Route 303 and where the rail trail parking is. It's, we're really getting there with Oak Tree Road. Jim Dean obviously has been advocating and building sidewalks wherever we have funding to do that. This is a priority area, and so I'll make a motion for the Oak Tree Road sidewalk grant application for $125,000 to Ellen Jaffe's office under the State and Municipal Facilities Program. Do I hear a second on that? You all right with that? Paul Valentine, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 20 is similarly, it's a funding application. This source of money is specifically for pedestrian improvements that are in the vicinity of train stations. So we're looking at some improvements, or in the vicinity of the Pearl River train station to sidewalks, and there's a couple of ideas for using $125,000 to make it just a little safer and more convenient for people to get from their homes or from their parking or from the shops over to the train station.
Well,
So we have a motion for this?
yeah, I'll move.
Second over here from Jerry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
And I'd like to thank Andy for calling me on this one. He called me,
What did I call you on?
the Pearl River train.
Oh, yeah.
Called me up and he wanted my input because my office is right there. And you know, I walked outside and I was looking, you know, and he had a couple ideas. I mean, one of the problem areas in Pearl River in that area is right at the corner of Main Street and East Central, right in front of the karate studio and the nail salon. The sidewalk around the turf makes this huge
It's a
two
step
steps.
which seems unsafe.
And I've talked to Jim Dean on this before, and the engineering to bring that slope to where it's acceptable would cost, I remember Jim telling me it would cost a lot of money to do that for the town. So this would be great for that area and bringing it all the way down to the train station where the people get off. Hopefully Ellen Jaffe can get us the money for something like that.
Just to be clear, we are currently unclear on the exact sidewalk areas that fall within the parameters of this funding.
Let's say that's within 50 yards.
Yeah.
I hope
Yeah.
50 yards is within the parameters.
So we're gonna go with, you know, obviously the highway department is gonna weigh in, and we'll see what the parameters of that grant are, and I hope that spot can be included.
All right.
Number 21 is documents received and filed at the town clerk's office. Do I hear a motion for number 21 over here?
Motion.
From Tom, a second from Dennis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 22 is the appointment of Jane Slavin to serve on the Office of Emergency Management Committee for the remainder of the term of John Giardello through December 31, 2017. Do I hear a motion over here for that? From Paul, second from Tom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 23 is appointing Jane also to serve on Project Review Committee for the same term. I'll hear a motion from Jerry Batari, second from myself. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank Jane
What do we got?
for her service to the town, and we're going to keep on adding things. Just going to keep on adding things.
Less
till
than
you
5, Jeff. Less than 5.
Start to get gray hair. Number 24 is our finance director is passing out the
Audit.
kind of the highlights of the audit for the town board review and approval. Jeff?
Take it away, Jeff.
Okay, tonight's audit consists of 3 warrants for $1.9 million. First warrant had 8 vouchers for $30,000 for High Torrent 207C payments. Second warrant had 46 vouchers for $407,000 for utilities. Third warrant had 215 vouchers for $1.4 million. Items of interest, number 1, ADS, $17,000 for sewer flow analysis. Number 2, LTEC, $179,000 for an aerial bucket truck for highway, which was bonded. 4 and 5, applied golf contracts. 8, CSEA employee benefits, $29,000 for dental. Number 9, environmental construction, $20,000 for sewer repairs. Number 12, Goosetown, $33,000 for police equipment rentals. Number 18, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, $15,000 for sewage fees. Number 19, New York State Department of Civil Service, $700,000 for CSEA healthcare. And number 20, $27,000 for theme park tickets, which is a pass-through. Any questions on the audit?
Move on the audit.
Aye, second for myself. All in favor, say aye. Does the town board want an executive session? Do I have a motion for an executive session? On any, you want to do what, on CSEA content?
That's what, yeah, Teresa wanted, right?
Yeah, Teresa? So we'll have a motion for executive session to take legal counsel on the topic of labor negotiations. I'll make a motion. Do I have a second? Oh, from Tom Divany. All in favor, say aye. So we will be doing an adjournment because we won't be returning to take any action. This is an executive session just for discussion and no agreement. And so with that, I'll also make a motion to adjourn this meeting in the memory of 4 individuals who are listed on the agenda here. A former police officer, Captain William Archacki, Ben Rujansky, who we talked about earlier tonight, Peter Bowen of Pearl River and Margaret Donovan of Pearl River.
I would like to be able to make a comment about Ben as well as Margaret. I've known both of them for many years, but Ben I met 20 years ago, and he was not only a proud World War II veteran, but he was always a scholar and a gentleman every day, and a very interesting addition to our meetings. Very nice man.
And I think we should add the victims of the massacre in Las Vegas to that list. Census Act. And also Tom Petty, loved his music. Rest in peace.
R.I.P. Tom Petty. And the flag is flying at half-mast in recognition of the tragedy in Las Vegas. So with that, I think I made a motion for adjournment. I got a second from over here, maybe from Jerry. All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. We're going into executive session, and there will be no further discussion in public.